I kind of can't believe that it's already time to be talking about this, but we are planting for fall, and you probably should be too. So we're in the Hometown Structures greenhouse today. This video is sponsored by them because we're going to be talking about what you can grow in a greenhouse in fall. Even if you don't have a greenhouse, even if you just have a cold frame or some row cover, these are things that you will be able to grow no matter what your growing conditions are in the cooler months. And honestly, I kind of love a fall garden. Like, I like it way better than a summer garden because it's way more low maintenance. So if you're at a point in the season where you're like, I am so done dealing with pests, with plant stress, with disease, like the cooler temperatures that we have heading into September, October, November actually make it way easier to get your plants to grow well, and you really don't face the same kind of challenges that you would in the heat of summer. So I have a big stack of my favorites to go through with you today. I'm going to tell you exactly why I picked the varieties that I picked, because sure, I can tell you to plant a kale, but don't you want to know what kind of kale you should plant? When we're growing in the greenhouse, there's a couple other small considerations that we have to keep in mind, but the benefit of it is that it's going to extend our season significantly. In fact, my goal is to continue growing in here all winter long and to show you that entire process as well. So we're starting that now at the end of August because we have to think ahead to daylight hours starting to shorten, and now is a time where we need to get those longer season crops that take a little while to take off but then do well in the cold. We need to get them started. We need to get things in the ground that will overwinter in the ground and become sweeter. So as you guys know, I have the Hometown Structures greenhouse set up with these 3.5 gallon buckets. I also have some 5 gallon nursery buckets in here, and I fill these with Coast of Maine potting soil. I do, because these are containers, end up needing to fertilize them fairly often. Probably every 2 to 3 weeks I'm adding a little bit of Stonington blend fertilizer, and that is a big consideration when you're growing in a greenhouse. Especially a lot of the times we are in some kind of container, not necessarily in ground, especially with the Hometown Structures greenhouses where they give you the option of adding a floor. It's not mandatory, but you can add a floor, which makes the space a lot more multifunctional. Then you're dealing with containers. You need to be thinking about feeding those plants more. Veggie plants are really heavy feeders. It'll slow down a lot as the fall kind of sets in and winter sets in and daylight hours shorten, but right now we want to give them a big boost. We want to baby them a little bit so that as they start to take off, they can really just then coast. Since we are kind of in between seasons here right now, I moved a couple of the pepper plants, about 4 of them outside, a couple of them on the ground here, just to make room for our new planters that are going in the next cycle of plants. So what I already have growing in these 8 containers with 8 more big ones to come is going to be a combination of things. Right now there's just 1 in everything, but I'm going to be putting smaller plants in as well. So this container is Mizuna, and we'll get into specifically what variety. I have purple snap peas in here because, as you can see, I've got my Malabar spinach and my rattlesnake beans trailing up. They're taking their sweet time though. I really wanted them to go onto this cross tie, and I don't know if they're gonna make it by this point, but the hope is that the snap peas can kind of do that same thing and grow up the rafters and the cross ties there. I also have some endive, which I'm trying a new variety of this year. This is prism kale, so spoiler alert, this is one of 3 different kinds of kale that we're going to be growing. The other one is ebony kale. These are great for containers, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. I have some sorrel in here. I'm not sure how to say that one, but it's one of my favorite leafy greens because it's a very lemony flavored. This is tender green mustard spinach, which is neither mustard nor spinach, but it's delicious regardless. And this is gai choy. So we have 4 different categories that we're going to cover today. And in order to get through all of them, you're going to want to first know your first frost date. So if you don't already know that, just Google your zip code and then the words first frost. Usually the first result that comes up for me is the Farmer's Almanac, and that is generally pretty accurate, although you need to keep in mind your microclimate. Once you know that, you can kind of go through these categories, and I do have a spreadsheet on this which I will link down below, so if you are here writing notes, you don't need to. I'm going to have that all set up for you so that you can just download it, grab and go, and start planting as your first frost dictates. But our categories are going to be plants that you sow 10 weeks before your first frost, then 8 weeks before your first frost, then 4 weeks before your first frost, and then our last category is things I'm actually going to be transplanting from outside to overwinter them inside because they don't grow as perennials in my zone. But if I can put them in a protected climate like my Hometown Structures greenhouse, they will overwinter and I can move them back outside for the spring. And all of these I'm going to be succession sowing every 3 to 4 weeks up until my first frost date. So I'm going to have a continuous supply through fall, but then I'm also going to have a supply that will hopefully overwinter that I can continue to harvest even after the daylight hours are too short for the plants to continue growing. So first up in that category, I have carrots. Carrots overwinter extremely well. I prefer to do Meg's Chaos sowing method with carrots where I just sprinkle them everywhere and whatever comes up, comes up. Meg does say that she has better luck doing this with kind of your classic Danvers type varieties. I'm experimenting a bit this year and I actually combined all my carrots into one packet, this dragon seed packet, but I've got 4 different varieties in this one packet. I have the dragon seeds, which are a purple carrot. I also have snowman carrots, which, true to the name, they are white. Then I have 2 kind of classic orange varieties. I have the Danvers carrot and I also have the Nanantis carrot. But carrots, it is time to put these in the ground because you really only do have to sow them once right now, and you can leave them in the ground over the winter and they'll get sweeter and sweeter. And then I'm trying a new variety of the endive that I just showed you already, and that's the Benefine Tress Fin. So this is from Territorial. I got a whole bunch of Territorial seeds this year. I know I'm mostly talking botanical interest because that's what we tested really hardcore last year, but I like to put a different seed company through the ringer for fall and for spring, and this time it was Territorial, so I did a big Territorial seed order. And I would just mix this up because I tried a different type of endive last year and I wasn't super impressed by it, so I'm trying a different one to see if I like it more. I was super impressed with the Mizuna that I grew from botanical interests last year. I still have some of those seeds, but I'm trying a Ms. America Mizuna, which is an F1 variety from Territorial this year. And the reason that I wanted a different Mizuna is because the one that I have previously is just a classic green Mizuna, and this one turns burgundy. And you know I'm all about adding more purple to the garden, so we got a burgundy variety to give that a try. I did mention the Gai Choi that we have earlier. These are botanical interest seeds from last year that I had. This is a very true mustard. It's pretty spicy, it's crunchy, so if you don't like mustard, you're not gonna like this one, but I think it adds some interest to the garden. You can enjoy it as a salad green too, or you can saute it and use it in many different Asian dishes. Then we move on to the kale trifecta. So you know I had the hardest time with my lacinato kale all spring and summer. Well, some of it's starting to take off now, but I got really frustrated with that seed packet. So I was like, we're branching out. We're gonna try a couple different things this year. So my goals with picking out varieties for kale, because there's so many, are I wanted something really compact because kale can get very big, and when I'm growing in containers, especially in the greenhouse, I want something that's not gonna take up too much space in a greenhouse environment, right? That's another consideration. If you're working in a greenhouse, you do need to make sure that you're considering how much space you have to work with and how big the plants you want to grow will actually get. So I have 3 varieties. I have the Prism F1, which is a compact version of the Winter Boar variety. You could grow this as microgreens too. I've done that where I just kind of sprinkle kale all around, but I am going to be trying to grow full-size plants in the greenhouse this year. I also have Red Boar, which is another type of winter boar. This one is a little bit burgundy, so we're adding more color. And then we're making another attempt at the lacinato kale. So this one is an Ebony F1 lacinato. I don't know, I can't get it to work, and I don't know why, because it's my favorite kind of kale. Whenever I go to the farmer's market, I get dinosaur or lacinato kale. And so we need to find one that grows well for me. I don't know why I keep having these problems. I already said we have the mustard Mizuna, which is a very mild mustard. So again, if you're on the other end of the spectrum with mustard and you don't like Gai Choi, you may like Mizuna because it's more mild. I had so much luck with this seed packet last year, and I actually had a plant that was in the shade of a couple pepper plants, and it really did well pretty late into spring. I would say even into early summer, which for a cold season crop normally it would have bolted, and it really didn't. And it's so dense and bushy, like you can just keep picking and picking every day as you need it, and it never stops. I also have the tender green mustard spinach. Again, not a mustard, not a spinach, but it has some of the best characteristics of both. So we're just trying to add a bunch of variety, because a lot of the times when we're growing in a greenhouse over the winter or in the ground over the winter, our options are fairly limited, right? We've kind of got leafy greens, brassicas, and root crops as our main categories. So we want as much variety as possible within those categories. And to that, we also are adding a bunch of lettuce. And this is something I'll be doing every 2 to 3 weeks. So I have my chef's medley. The reason I like the chef's medley specifically, and I will link these below for you guys if I can link specific seed packets. This one has both oak leaf and like head lettuce. So a lot of times the mixes will be like just mesclun or something like that, where it's just like the leafy ones where you pick individual soft leaves. But this gives you a variety of texture, which I really like to have. Then I will also grab whatever my favorite kind of lettuce is as an individual packet. So right now that's Butter Crunch. It's just a really dependable grower. I find it can be really flavorful, especially in the cooler months. It does very well. That's everything that we have in our 10 weeks before your first frost category. So moving on to 8 weeks before your first frost, we only have a few things, and then it ramps back up when we get down to like 4 weeks before your first frost. Most of these are going to be your root crops. So I do have some radishes here, and I've done so many different kinds of radishes. My favorite is usually the French breakfast radish, but I'm trying to mix it up. So we've got Crunchy Crimson F1 table radishes. These mature in 28 days. Like, that is so fast. And I love that you get like different colors with these. Radishes are so easy to grow if you've never grown anything before. And I also have a couple different kinds of beets, which the verdict is still out on whether or not I like beets. I don't really get many of these Touchstone Gold beets to germinate in the spring. So I have two that I literally just picked because they were like buried under something and I didn't even know that they were there. So I'm going to be trying them to see if I actually do like them, because these ones are supposed to have less of an earthy flavor, but I did get more of a classic Chayogia beet. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. I'm probably not, but it's basically got like the white and red swirls inside, like a peppermint candy cane kind of. So I just got this one because I thought it looked cool, honestly. I don't really know if I'm even gonna like eating it, but if I don't, I will give it away. I think this one's really important to add to a winter greenhouse garden, because a lot of the times we're dealing with things that are pretty much just green and we want to add a little bit of extra color. So I am adding 5 color silver beet, which is also known as Swiss chard. I usually do a ruby red Swiss chard too, because then you get ruby red stems. Will always ask me how I use this in cooking. It cooks just like spinach. I throw it in sautés, I throw it in soups, and I also use it in quiche. So we're now into 4 weeks before our first frost, which we're really not here yet. Like, it's only the end of August, so these ones have a ways to go before I'm ready to plant these. In zone 6B, our first frost date is usually Halloween, somewhere around there, although it's been getting later and later every single year. But we do need the daylight hours, so I also have to keep that in mind too, as to how many daylight hours these things are gonna need. And we have a good number of mustards in here, so I do have something called Dragon Tongue. I don't know what this is. It kind of looks like a Mizuna to me, but I guess we'll see. There's a lot of different like mustards, and sometimes I just get stuff because I've never had it before and I think it sounds cool. But for the most part, these are things that I have grown before. And number one, especially if you are growing outside, you have no protection at all for your plants, this is going to be your most cold hardy. I've seen this one survive down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. That's your rosette tatsoi. It's a beautiful plant. I think I'm going to do this one in the containers behind me on the shelves there, because they won't be covered, so they won't be protected as much. It has really thick, like succulent leaves and a really mild mustard flavor. So I think they're delicious and very plateable to most people. I'm also growing a variety of spinach that's bred specifically for late summer and fall seeding. It grows in about 45 days. It's called Giant Winter Smooth Spinach. So this is a very large variety. It is not a baby spinach. I'm excited to try this one. So far, I have it in the green stock planters outside already, and it's germinated. It's doing great. The germination temps on these go from 45 to 75. So you can start planting it as early as late August, which I already have, and as late as 4 weeks before your last frost date. The most controversial pick of the season is always arugula. I told you guys last fall I hated arugula. Then I grew astro arugula and I realized I just hated arugula that was grown in warmer temperatures. If you grow arugula when it's cold outside, it is much sweeter, it is much more mild. You can control when you pick it, you can pick it when it's smaller and even more mild. I love the depth of flavor that this adds to things. Putting it on pizza with like caramelized onions and balsamic glaze, oh my God. It just does not get better. So I usually grow astro, usually as in since last year, but I'm trying speedy this year as well. Supposedly this next one was actually the plant that they were talking about in the original story of Rapunzel, but it goes by a few different names. It goes by mosh, lamb's lettuce, and also vit. So it has very small little leaves. It's a very pleasant, mild green. Leaves are succulent, they're firm. Highly, highly recommend if you like lettuce and spinach and you don't want some weird mustardy flavor. Mosh is a great choice. I have a couple different types of pak choi. So this is like a bok choy basically. These ones mature in between 30 and like 45 days. So really fast growers, which is another benefit of growing things over the winter, especially in a greenhouse where you have less sunlight. You need to be keeping in mind days to maturity a lot of the time. So I have Joy Choi here, which is a large pak choi with dark green leaves. It can grow up to 11 inches long. So I'm interested to see that one. And then I'm growing Violetta because we have to have our purple, and this one apparently will turn purple on the leaves as it matures. And the last two, which I know I already have one of these planted because I kind of got ahead of myself, but I have sorrel or sorrel, we don't know. And this one has that amazing lemony flavor. And since we have our lemon flavor and we have our mustard flavor, we also need our onion flavor, which is gonna come from these Tokyo long white scallions. One of my favorite things about the greenhouse is that it's gonna allow me to overwinter plants that normally live outside and aren't perennial here in zone 6B, but I'll be able to keep them dormant in the greenhouse, keep them protected. So I have a few things that I'll be transplanting inside. And I also have some of these peppers that I'm going to be attempting to overwinter inside too. So I don't have room to keep all of them, but I will keep the healthiest, biggest plants and try to overwinter those so that we can get a head start on our peppers next year because they are perennial in some zones. But other than that, I will be moving inside my rosemary, my tea bush, my hibiscus, and potentially my lemon verbena and pineapple sage. I haven't decided about those two yet. Depends how much room I have going on in here. But another amazing thing about having a greenhouse like this one is it allows you to get a head start on so many things. So I already have a lot of seeds going for the outside garden as well in the greenhouse. So having that space that's dedicated that I can use to actually grow things for both inside and outside has made a huge difference in being able to like maximize the space that I have in both places. And as we head into fall and into winter, I'm going to be able to really show you how this space functions more as a multi-purpose space for us to enjoy other hobbies that are related to gardening, but not necessarily gardening themselves. So we're in the process of getting the other half of this area set up for you guys so that we can do some live streams, some Q&As. So make sure you're checking in on the community tab because I'll be asking you to post your questions there. We're just gonna be making it a really cozy spot to hang out because I wanna show you why I went with this greenhouse from Hometown Structures. What makes it so great that I can actually grow plants in here and kind of live my life in here in ways that are really important to my mental health too. I hope this was helpful. Make sure to grab that download with the full planting spreadsheet for fall down below. Thank you so much for gardening with me and happy growing.